e4, c5, knight f3, e6, and knight c3. In the previous video, we went through knight c6. We're also going to go through a6 extensively. There's going to be a lot about a6, which is the most annoying move. In this video, though, I'm going to go through this very surprising but also very popular variation and how to punish it. d5 immediately is met by pawn takes, and after pawn takes, bishop e5 is check, and it forces a reply. The reply could be knight c6 or bishop to d7. Well, knight to d7 just drops a pawn, so that eventually you can take. Let's look at knight c6 just to start. White now goes on with castling, so developing every single move. And after bishop e7, white continues with d4. This is thematic in these situations. It's not a move to remember, rather than just to know and understand. Why d4 here? Well, not just because it's kind of typical in the Sicilian to give the d4 pawn for the development of the knight into an excellent square, but it's not the point. The point is that we are now isolating a pawn. You can even think of taking this. Black will have to give up a tempo because he had played bishop e7 then bishop c5, so wasting a tempo, and also isolating the d5 pawn, which will be a future target of the knight and the queen. So after d4, black plays knight f6, for instance. White continues with well, black plays not just for instance, but because he's got to develop pieces anyway. Knight to e5, putting pressure on the knight. If black plays bishop to d7, for example, then you can just take it, and then queen takes, and now pawn takes, and bishop takes. These are all forced moves. And now bishop to g5. In this scenario, it's not super recommendable to play rook e1 or something like that, because eventually a move like knight to g4 could be really annoying to meet with this f2 weakness and so on. So anyway, bishop g5 is the best move. The idea is when we take the knight, black will isolate and double up the pawns here, and also it's not recommendable to move this knight, because then the attack of the rook in that case will be too strong. In that case, it will be possible because the knight will not be able to go anywhere that makes sense. So let's have a look at this idea, long castle, which also makes sense because it supports the d5 pawn a bit more because it's an isolated pawn. And also, if we actually do this swap, black will have the rook in g8, which will be a very good place to be. So best move by white now is queen f3, still keeping an eye on this pawn, putting more pressure on f6 and preparing the rooks to come into the game. After rook h to e8, which seems to be making perfect sense for black, also because the black knight is pinned and there was no way to stop us from taking. So bishop takes, pawn takes back, and now taking this pawn is kind of greedy because it helps black's development too much. Best move is rook a to d1, threatening to take in d5. Best move by black is rook to e5, develops a rook, prepares to double up, puts more defense over d5. White now can take in f6 because the development is complete. Well, except this rook, but there will be a time for it. And after rook to f5, attacking the queen. These are the best moves for black anyway, computer moves. Queen to h4, putting pressure on h7. And after queen to e6, white can now swap everything else. Bishop takes, queen takes, and now knight to e2, idea of going to d4. And once again, after queen e6, best possible move by black. Remember, white will win this game because you gotta play an accurate endgame here. We've got an extra pawn and much better pawn structure. We've literally got a majority on the king side. So after knight to d4, forcing black to take, rook takes back. Best move by black. The reason why he played queen e6 in the first place was to reach the 7th rank. Nothing to worry, white can take in h7. And this is where I've decided to stop the line, because there's just trillions of possible moves here. I mean, we're in the end game and you don't know how black will want to continue this, but it's completely lost. Some solid moves, white should be able to win this without problems. Let's restart and let's look at the other variation after a6 and knight c3, and the immediate d5 move, take, and then check. What happens if they block with the bishop? Now queen e2 check. Now it's not good to block with the bishop, also because there's a problem in d5. And so after queen e7, white takes the bishop with check, knight takes back. Knight d5 now is still possible because we'll be threatening the square in c7, just like we would have before. I mean, we wouldn't have threatened c7 if the bishop had played to e7, but we would have won a pawn. But there was an attack on our bishop and it was going to be more complicated. It was not even like the knight, like as an opening if you want to play that. It's not like a major mistake at all. But the good thing now is that we no longer will have like a hanging bishop. Yes, there was going to be some knight c7 tactic anyway, but this is much simpler variation. After queen takes and king takes back, black playing bishop to d6, protecting everything and developing the pieces. White can continue now with d4. Let's look at two ideas now. The developing one, which would be knight to e7, or the more simple and typical pawn takes d4. Let's start with pawn d4. So pawn takes. Now white continues with rook to d1. We will take that pawn eventually. And after knight to e7, the rook can take the pawn. And white is winning here, by the way. He's got a good advantage, excellent position. White is basically completely developed. Like his pieces are fine. Well, okay, the bishop is not developed yet, but the development of the white play consists of how well the pieces are placed. For instance, black cannot castle on the king side because knight takes. There would be a discovered attack on the knight. So after bishop to c5, which puts more pressure on the rook, knight c7 comes with a check. I've encountered this move before, king d8, and now we can take the rook, and after bishop takes, our rook and knight takes back. Black's best attempt is knight to d5, the idea of getting the king out whilst the knight protects f7 so that the rook can recapture the knight. But now white plays c4, and after knight to b4, bishop to e3, white just has a great advantage. Right, in this position we went through c takes d4. What happens after knight e7? Now we can take the pawn in c5, and we're threatening to take the bishop and go to the endgame, which is a very open endgame, and we are gonna have bishop against knight, so that's better. So after knight takes e5, allowing the bishop to still protect c7 from the threat of the fork, white plays the usual rook to d1. Let's have a look at this idea this time, which is long castle. There's no queens on the board, so there's no much to worry here. So long castle is perfectly justifiable. Knight takes finally with check, bishop takes, and now we can swap rooks. And it looks like we're going to a losing endgame because we're just swapping stuff. But the thing is that after bishop to e3, simply we will win because of the majority on the queen side, and we will have to favor the swapping of all the pieces of the bishop to e3, and let's say a6 for instance, rook to d1. And yes, now this is a winning endgame for white. White will just have to start pushing the pawns and play accurate for the endgame. And that is to assume, I mean, if we really end up with this exact position in the endgame, this is just move 15 if you think about it. If you really end up in this position, and chances are you will not, because you will have won before, because this is to assume that black would have played the absolute best moves to defend himself in the d5 variation of this French Sicilian, which is not supposed to be good.